Hi, back in session with Professor P. We're going to go over Chapter 11, Come Tell Me How You Lived. If you want to follow along with your concept sheets, you could print them out or go to your Canvas course and follow along. All right, this chapter is all about subsistence. Subsistence is about ancient diet. How do we understand ancient diet? We're going to talk about animal bones and zooarchaeology and bone assemblages and sort of what's the difference between, natural animals, domesticated animals. So we really want to look at how we reconstruct the ancient diet. What were people eating, right? That becomes very important, right? So that's what we're talking about with subsistence. With zooarchaeology, we want to study animal bones. We want to use those bones to identify the kinds of animals that lived in the past, maybe even kinds of butchery methods, and things like that. So there's lots of things. The evidence of subsistence can be found in a variety of different formats, okay? Let's get to ancient diet. Some of the stuff that they were talking about in that chapter is looking at even the Tullenman in Danish culture and looking at his stomach. And what we gathered was that he was eating porridge, grasses, different kinds of grains, right? Even with the Iceman, many of you have heard of the Iceman. There's a lot of documentaries. By looking at his bones, we found through the Harris lines and through indentations, malnutrition from his bones. He must have suffered famine at a point of his life. So really those ancient digestive tracts can tell us a lot about things. Human feces is also very important to look at. It could tell us, what people were eating through that way as well. Along with bone chemistry can show diet. You know that saying, what you are, and you are what you eat type of saying? We could look at the carbon, we could look at nitrogen and isotopes and all this stuff to look at human bones and look at what people were eating, right? It's a variety of different ways we can do that. Animal bones also is a good way. Looking at broken animal bones can tell you to identify different skeletal remains, the kinds of animals people were eating, the kinds of animals they were hunting, the kinds of animals in certain environments. That becomes very important. All right, zooarchaeology. Remember that's really about scientists sort of studying animal remains in the field of archaeology, whether it's animal bones, whether it's looking at how we reconstruct human behavior through those bones. So that becomes quite important. Temporonomy is another area within zooarchaeology, and basically that's studying sort of the process by which animal bones and other fossil remains are transformed after sort of deposition. So deposits, right? So there's two things when we look at temporonomy we can understand. Observing the dead carcass in and of itself as it transfers into a fossil, and the second is looking at sort of studying the fossil remains with the knowledge of sort of the transformation process. So we have analyzing the dead carcass, right? As they transform into a fossil, and then second, analyzing the fossil in and of itself to tell what kind of knowledge that we could gain from it. That becomes quite important. All right, there's two goals of zooarchaeology. The first one is identifying just the number of species out there, what kind of species they are, identifying that animal. The second is identifying it through body parts. All right, those are the two kinds of things that they're analyzing. Domesticated animals are animals that were selective breeding. It's very difficult to tell what was domesticated and then what was occurring naturally in the environment. But what we do know is that when we have selective breeding, we have to really try to understand why people were breeding certain animals at the time, right? Ancient butchery also is really looking at ancient people, why are they butchering certain animals? Was it providing them with meat, milk? What was it used for, right? Part of their diet. So that becomes quite important in the field of archaeology as well. Let's look at teeth and then joints. When we look at teeth, we know it could tell us a lot of stuff. Age, right? Size, right? Even in anthropology, if we're looking at humans, we could actually tell ethnic identity, height, weight. It could really be an indicator of a lot of different things. When we look at the joints, we can also establish age, and these limbs can tell us, were they in adulthood, were they immature, were they fully grown? So we use this to actually analyze a lot of things. All right, let's continue. Catastrophic age profile wants to analyze sort of the distribution of ages in an animal population as a result of causes by natural, right? By death by natural causes. When we look at attritional age profile, we actually want to look at the distribution of ages in an animal population that result from selective hunting or predation. All right, those are two different things. And we have to sort of understand these things. All right, plant remains. Plant remains also become quite important because it could tell us about cultivation. It could tell us about what people were actually wanting to cultivate and eat. If we look at sort of maize cultivation or teosinte, right? We could look at 5000 BC and look at why in Mesoamerica were they breeding, teosinte into maize or corn as we know it. All right, those are the kinds of things that we want to analyze. Macro botanical remains is really looking at recognizable items in hearths, charcoal, things like that. Paleoethnobotanists are scientists who recover and identify ancient vegetable remains. They want to analyze the relationship between people and vegetation. That becomes actually very important. Paleontology is basically pollen analysis. Again, telling us a lot about what was occurring in the environment. All right, let's move on. Opal Phytolifts. Basically, again, looking at plant cells, looking at plant roots, and looking at these kinds of things to give us an idea about people's behavior, eating, consumption, subsistence, and everything that we've been talking about till now. Coprolites are human feces. We talked about that just before, what they can tell us. Even today, what can it tell us a lot about diet? It could tell us about disease and health and things like that. Bone chemistry, we want to look at bones and isotope analysis. And now we know with like DNA, analyzing DNA can tell us about specific species. It can tell us about, genetic codes. It could tell us, even how to find, killers, things like that. It becomes important. All right, the last thing in that chapter was analyzing rock art and cave art, because historically in the caves, what was being drawn were animals and hunting skills. So it actually talked about subsistence. It was like a teaching methodology when you went into the cave. So you would see maybe a Pleistocene megafauna, a woolly mammoth, and then you'd see where the arrow was shot, or, a line drive they were doing. So it was really about a teaching area in the caves. There's 3 areas in the caves that were very important. So in the caves, the entrance of the caves were very important. The middle area called the galleries is where most of the hunting techniques and the drawings were at. And the back ends of the art in the caves was all about religion and religious ideology. All right, I hope you enjoyed chapter 11. I'll see you for chapter 12. Professor Padilla. Bye.